Rusty walks to his car. Defendant approaches him, pulls his gun, and shoots him 3 times.
Hemy Neuman was a middle-aged executive at GE Energy. Certainly the last person you suspect in something like this.
She told him she would never leave her husband Rusty, but then she told him she fantasized about him.
What she didn't know was that she was walking into a trap set by the state.
Andrea did not have a clue, in my opinion, of what we were about to do when the trial started.
Why were you protecting the defendant?
I was not.
Why didn't you mention his name?
Andrea's father had said, "Are you going to charge Andrea with murder?"
We're here in the Atlanta suburb of Dunwoody, Georgia. Behind me is Dunwoody Prep, a private daycare and preschool in a largely Jewish neighborhood. On November 18, 2010, 36-year-old Rusty Sneiderman dropped his 2-year-old son Ian off at this daycare. As he exited the building and walked through the parking lot back to his car, a bearded man jumped out of a minivan. He pulled out a pistol and fired 3 times, wounding Rusty, who fell to the ground. The man then walked over to Rusty and fired 1 more shot, striking Rusty in the neck. The attacker then got into his vehicle and sped away.
Daycare emergency 911. What's the address of the emergency?
Somebody's been shot and killed out in front of Dunwoody Prep. The gentleman was driving a silver Caravan type car. I don't know if it's a Dodge.
Did you get tag number?
I didn't get a tag number. We headed east out Vernon.
When police arrived on the scene, they found a middle-aged man lying in the parking lot behind me, bleeding from multiple gunshot wounds. Paramedics rushed him to the hospital as investigators tried to piece together what had happened. After talking with witnesses, one thing in particular stood out. The shooting seemed personal.
When I arrived at the scene, our detectives were there, starting their investigation, gathering evidence. This didn't seem like a random crime. Didn't appear to be a robbery or, some other dispute.
Eyewitnesses described a white van fleeing from the scene. Those who had gotten a glimpse of the shooter described a male with a beard or possibly a fake beard. Police artists created a composite sketch and distributed it to the news media.
There was rumors going around based on the sketch that this was a anti-Semitic crime.
We do have a large Jewish community in Dunwoody. We have seen where several anti-Semitic things have been either spray painted or written or flyers found in mailbox leading up to this murder.
Police identified the victim as 36-year-old Russell Rusty Sneiderman, who lived here with his wife Andrea and their 2 children. He was an entrepreneur who had recently been raising money for a startup.
We certainly looked at all connections to Rusty Sneiderman from a business standpoint.
They turned to Rusty's wife, Andrea, in search of possible suspects.
She was asked, do you think there's anyone who may have any interest in you that would cause them to kill your husband?
We, of course, asked the hard questions, was he having an affair? How was their marriage? Those sorts of things. She denied that he was having an affair or that she was having an affair.
There was one man that she mentioned in passing.
She had mentioned that one time her boss had hit on her, but she had rejected it and everything was cool, that it only happened one time and there was nothing to it, basically.
The only substantial clue that detectives had to go on came from the daycare's surveillance camera.
Video was recovered that showed the vehicle leaving the area immediately after the shooting.
The video was not the best video, so it wasn't, the most clear. We found a private company that we sent it off to have it enhanced as well.
That's when police got their first real break. The vehicle was identified as a brand new silver Kia Sedona minivan. Motor vehicle records showed that only 13 such minivans were registered in the entire state of Georgia.
We tracked down every one of those vehicles. All of those vehicles were accounted for. Everybody had alibis that had owned those vehicles, with the exception of one of the vehicles, which was from a rental car company in metropolitan Atlanta.
On the day of the murder, the car had been rented by a man named Hemy Neuman.
Hemy Neuman was a middle-aged executive at GE Energy. He was married with 3 kids, no criminal backgrounds at all. Certainly the last person you suspect in something like this.
Hemy Neuman worked for GE in this highly secured building behind me in Marietta, Georgia. Just so happened that one of the employees he managed was Andrea Sneiderman, Rusty's wife.
When reached by police while on vacation, though admitting he'd rented the vehicle because his car was in the shop, Hemy had what appeared to be an airtight alibi. He said he'd been at work when the murder occurred.
The surveillance video at GE showed him entering the campus in his vehicle, walking through the main security checkpoint to enter the building.
Cell phone records appeared to support his alibi.
That phone was pinging off of towers at or near GE, so, we really couldn't use his phone to put him elsewhere.
Records from GE also placed Hemy at work.
His alibi at the time seemed pretty solid. Per their main entrance video and the swipe system, he never left. So we had to keep digging.
Investigators poured over thousands of hours of surveillance video, and that's when they found the evidence that blew the case wide open.
What further looking at the video showed was he did make an exit through one of the secondary exits normally used by employees to do smoke breaks. You soon saw another shot leaving the campus in his vehicle.
Video footage showed him returning to GE after the murder, re-entering using a guest access card.
He had left work and was gone for a couple of hours, certainly enough time to commit the crime, and then return back to his office.
Investigators asked Hemy Neuman to come into the Dunwoody Police Department for an interview.
You all right? It's unnerving to be in a room like this. I hope I don't make it unnerving for you, believe me, because I am.
They first approached him by saying, okay, we believe this vehicle was involved. We believe you rented it. What did you do with the vehicle? And he played the part that he was ready to play. I don't know what you're talking about. I was at work. I never left work.
I'm telling you, you were there when Rusty got shot. Now, Hemy, you were there. I know you were. Hemy, because it's on video. That van is on the video.
He said quite a bit during the interview, but denied killing Rusty Sneiderman. After the interview, we felt like we had enough probable cause to arrest him, and we did at that time.
But without a confession and with no murder weapon, their case remained entirely circumstantial.
Georgia law doesn't require that you have a murder weapon to prove a murder, but it always helps if you're going to ask a jury to find someone guilty of murder. So we searched his emails. We had a lot of outside assistance.
And they found that less than 3 weeks before the murder, Hemy had purchased a .40 caliber pistol from a private seller. Detectives tracked down the man who sold the pistol to Neuman. They also spoke with the owner of a firing range that Hemy had visited prior to the murder.
He actually had test fired that gun and had a shell casing still. And so we obviously recovered shell casings from the scene, and we were able to get that shell casing, have it analyzed and compared to the shell casings recovered at the scene, and they were a match.
We went from we have just enough probable cause to be sure we know who our guy is to know we have enough evidence to convict him at trial.
One question remained. What had driven Hemy Neuman to kill Rusty Sneiderman?
We were speculating somewhat about why this transpired. We started wondering if what Andrea knew about the whole situation.
When we return, police start to wonder if Andrea Sneiderman might know more than she's letting on.
It began to look more and more like there was some type of romantic relationship.
With Carvana today.
After arresting Hemy Neuman, prosecutors gathered further evidence that his relationship with Andrea Sneiderman was much closer than she had admitted.
They were in constant communication, tons of text, emails.
There had been a search on Andrea and Rusty's computer for death benefits or life insurance benefits just the day before or 2 days before he was killed.
Some in the prosecutor's office thought the evidence was so strong, they wanted to indict Andrea as the mastermind behind her husband's murder.
Don Geary was initially the sole prosecutor in Hemy's murder trial.
My belief has always been that Andrea was the mastermind and Hemy was the puppet. My indictments had Andrea on there as a party to a crime. The DA did not want to do that. He thought that would distract from the case and it would hurt our case.
District Attorney Robert James became the lead prosecutor after the murder became a high-profile case. The DA wanted to put Andrea under oath, ask tough questions about her relationship with Hemy, and use those answers to potentially build a murder case against her.
There was information that we needed from her, and it's easier to get that information voluntarily than it is, when somebody is, called a suspect or in handcuffs. And so we worked with her for a while, not completely disclosing that we suspected her.
But the prosecution's first order of business was preparing for the trial of Hemy Neuman, the man actually charged with murdering Rusty Sneiderman. And what at first glance seemed like a clear-cut case became much more complicated when Hemy pleaded not guilty by reason of insanity. He claimed that bipolar disorder led him to hallucinate that he was being visited by two apparitions. The first he described as a shadow demon with a deep voice he likened to Barry White, who would appear and try to convince Hemy to kill himself. The second apparition he described as an angel with a voice similar to Olivia Newton-John, who appeared to him on the road one evening, warning him that Rusty was going to harm Andrea's children and must be killed to eliminate the threat. While they may not have specifically anticipated shadow demons and murderous angels, prosecutors weren't surprised by Hemy's plea of insanity.
Hemy Neuman was a brilliant man. Hemy Neuman had been married for a very long time. None of that was consistent with him performing this act. The only thing that possibly made any sense was that he was either insane or temporarily insane.
As the trial started, there's little mystery because Hemy, confessed that he had shot Rusty. So then the trial becomes more about his mental state, and that opens up the whole relationship with Andrea.
On February 21st, 2012, Hemy Neuman went on trial in this Georgia courthouse for the murder of Rusty Sneiderman. The prosecution wasted no time in highlighting the horrific and sudden end to Rusty's life.
As Rusty walks to his car, the defendant approaches him, pulls his gun, and he shoots him 3 times. Here, here, and here. As Rusty falls in the parking lot that cold November morning, dying, the defendant's not satisfied. He walks up and he puts that .40 caliber hollow point to Rusty's neck, to his jugular, fires one last time.
The prosecution also contended that Neuman was simply faking mental illness to avoid having to pay for his actions.
You'll hear from Dr. Crawford, the state's expert, who did a full evaluation for legal insanity. To not be responsible, you've got to meet requirements. And she'll tell you this defendant doesn't come close.
We learned he had financial problems. We learned he had marital problems. We knew he was having an affair with Andrea. So the motive was clear. He wanted the man's life, he wanted his wife. And it's important because ultimately when someone is pleading insanity, they're saying that my motive is not money, my motive is not lust or love.
To establish that lust was indeed his motive, the prosecution called on Melanie White, a friend that Hemy had confided in about his relationship with Andrea.
I asked him if there was someone else in his life.
And how did he respond?
He said there was someone that he was fond of at work.
Someone he was fond of at work. Did he tell you anything about this someone?
He told me that she was married. He told me that she had 2 small children.
She also testified about romantic side trips that Hemy and Andrea planned while abroad, like an excursion to London where Andrea talked about wanting to go to a club.
What did he tell you about the London trip?
That he and Andrea got closer. I believe that was the time that he said that he and Andrea had decided that they were soulmates. He also told me that Andrea was adamant that she would not leave her husband and her 2 kids, and he continually asked me what I thought he should do.
You said he and Andrea. Did you get the impression that he was saying both of them decided they were soulmates?
Yes.
While Hemy was the one on trial, the prosecution also wanted to show that Andrea was lying when she denied to police she was having an affair.
We had to show the truth of the matter involving both of them. Everywhere we turned, there was something that gave us circumstantial evidence that Andrea is a part of this. And then, we started looking at the business trips. We started finding emails. We started doing search warrants for emails.
Some of those emails referenced a business trip to Greenville, South Carolina, and seemed to indicate that the two were indeed having an affair. After their first night there, Andrea sent Hemy an email saying, quote, "Your apology is heartfelt, but does not make the ongoing pain go away, that I now have to repent and live with this for the rest of my life," ending by saying, "I'm not sure how to live with this." Hemy responded saying, "I fully understand, and I know nothing I say now will help." The couple returned to Greenville, South Carolina a few months later, checking into the Hampton Inn, where they stayed in adjoining rooms 612 and 614.
We actually went to the location and started talking to people at restaurants, and there were a few that actually, for this reason or that reason, remembered them being there.
One of those people was Christine Oliveira, a waitress at a restaurant near the Hampton Inn.
Do you remember what they did while they were at the restaurant or at the lounge?
They drank, they danced.
Okay, they danced.
Yes.
Did they dance separately or did they dance together?
They danced together.
Did they have physical contact?
Yes, they did.
Describe what you saw.
What stood out most was that he kept spinning her around to the salsa music. I know at one point she kind of was dancing for him. He pulled her back, groped her. They were groping each other, I know, because I kind of turned away. He had his hands on her rear end, and she was hugging him, and they looked like a couple. I mean, groping, like touching each other.
Okay. At any time did you see the parties kiss?
Yes, I did.
Was it lip-to-lip contact?
Yes, it was. They were having their own moment. I didn't want to interrupt them, but they were kissing and they were being affectionate towards one another. And they left very happy. They left with their arms around each other. He kissed her on the way out, and that was the last I saw of them.
When we return, the murder trial against Hemy Neuman is about to become a proxy trial against Andrea Sneiderman as the prosecution turns against their star witness.
What she didn't know, or maybe should have known but didn't plan for, was that she was walking into a trap set by the state.
We are underway in the trial of doomsday prophet Chad Daybell.
Prosecutors say they will seek the death penalty against him.
Investigators have recovered human remains at Chad Daybell's residence.
There's no way, Logan. I can never come up with this.
His wife, Lori Vallow Daybell, has already been convicted.
Now, will her husband end up with the same fate?
It's just so hard to know where the truth ends.
It's the doomsday prophet, Chad Daybell, on trial.
While it was Hemy Neuman who was on trial for the murder of Rusty Sneiderman, the prosecution also had their sights set on Andrea Sneiderman, who they believed may have actually been the mastermind behind her husband's murder.
Andrea did not have a clue, in my opinion, of what we were about to do when the trial started. So she was still acting the part, if you will, of the widow and the victim, my poor kids and me, my husband's gone.
Ma'am, did you know Rusty Sneiderman?
Yes.
How did you know Rusty?
He is my husband.
We get some basic information, no idea, and that was purposeful on our part. She had no idea where we were going.
And when were you married?
We were married December 30th of 2000.
And do you have children?
Yes.
How many?
2.
How old are they?
Currently 6.5 and almost 3.5.
Our theory was that they conspired, and our strategy, our goal was to essentially get her on the stand and confront her with this so that we could prove motive firsthand.
Prior to November 18, 2010, did the defendant ever express his feelings for you?
Yes.
And first, when did that happen?
We were in Minden, Nevada at a site that I had responsibility for. That night we went to dinner, and he pulled out his phone and read a poem. The insinuation of the poem to me was that he had deeper feelings for me than just friends.
And she claimed that she didn't have an interest and she didn't motivate him.
When the defendant told you that, did it bother you that he had feelings for you?
Did it bother me?
Did it bother you?
Yes.
Did you express that to the defendant?
Yes.
Okay. Did you ever report the defendant's contact to anybody at GE?
No.
Why not?
I would have been fired.
I don't think anybody believed for a second that a company with the reputation and the size, the contracts of GE would have fired her if her boss was doing something completely inappropriate.
On June 30th, did you have dinner with the defendant in Norfolk?
I don't remember. I'm certain the answer is yes. We had dinner every time we went out of town.
Do you remember during that dinner sharing a bottle of wine?
I think almost every time I sat down to a business dinner, I had a bottle of wine. Shared a bottle of wine.
Why would you share a bottle of wine at dinner, far away from home, without your family there, with a man that just expressed those feelings to you?
Because when I told him that I wasn't interested, he seemed like everything was fine.
How do you continue to take business trips, and how do you continue to share a bottle of wine at dinner with someone who is basically a married man, not your husband, who's just said he's in love with you? Well, we had caught Andrea in quite a few lies, one of which we had set up was a business trip that they had taken to Colorado.
Do you remember telling Chief Sides on January 5th, 2011, that the defendant was not in Longmont with you?
He did not go to Longmont with me. That's correct.
You said he was not in Longmont with you.
I don't remember almost anything I said in that interview. That was the day after my boss was arrested for the murder of my husband.
She tells them he was not there. Not that he came later or not that he came out on his own. He wasn't there.
When you were in Longmont, did the defendant attempt to have flowers and chocolates and a love note waiting for you in Longmont?
I was not aware of that until it came out in the proceedings here so far. I was not aware of that.
My handing was in Mark State's exhibit number 10. Can you identify this from, please?
Okay.
Well, what does that say?
He talks about chocolates and flowers that they were supposed to leave in my room. I don't remember receiving this email.
Do you remember your response on the very bottom?
No.
You don't remember responding? So thoughtful and sweet. I knew you might try something like this.
I don't remember responding that, no.
It was important in our case to show her involvement and to show she was lying about what clearly was an affair.
Andrea was next confronted with the emails expressing regret for what had happened in Greenville, South Carolina.
Hemy Neuman says, "This is the last one from me. I know it won't help, but please never forget how much I love you." And how did you respond?
I know, but so do other people. I betrayed them all. I'm not sure how to deal with that for now, but my burden, not yours.
What happened in Greenville, ma'am?
We were holding each other's hands. That's it. It may sound worse than it is, but to me, that was a betrayal.
So you're repenting in the email, at least, from holding his hand?
Yep.
The testimony was extremely compelling. There was always a feeling that she was not being completely honest, that she was hiding something.
Another important detail she hid from police was her suspicion that Hemy Neuman might have been her husband's killer.
You told Tammy Parker you knew who it was. You never told the police, "I know who it is, it's Hemy Neuman," did you?
That's correct.
You took them down a rabbit hole and tried to get them to look at all these other people, didn't you?
No, sir, I didn't.
Why were you protecting the defendant?
I was not.
Why didn't you mention his name?
Have you seen what's happened to my life?
Have you seen what's happened to Rusty?
Have you noticed what's happened to my life since Hemy was murdered? Since Hemy murdered my husband?
She was trying to play the poor, grieved widow. Poor me, poor me. Did you see what happened to me when Hemy killed Rusty? And I think my response was, did you see what happened to Rusty?
But perhaps the most compelling evidence against Andrea was her own testimony about the timing of when she found out how Rusty had been killed.
Did you get a phone call from the daycare?
Yeah.
What did they tell you?
Really didn't tell me anything. They said there has been an accident.
I'm sorry, just speak up a little, please.
They said there had been an accident, that Ian was fine, but there had been an accident.
And the accident specifically was directed to Rusty? Or did they tell you?
They didn't really tell me. And then I screamed into the phone asking what was going on. They just said, "You need to come here." So I dropped the phone and ran out of my office.
Did they at any time tell you what had happened to Rusty?
Nope.
Andrea stated that she didn't know Rusty had been shot or killed until she got to the hospital.
When you went to the Atlanta Medical Center, ma'am, did you find out what had happened to Rusty?
They took me into what I call the death room.
Okay, so they told...
I sat in a chair, and someone, I have no idea who they are, came over and said that he came in with multiple gunshot wounds and that he was dead. I don't remember anything they said after that.
Okay, so you found...
I fell to the floor.
You found out at the hospital that Rusty had been shot?
That's correct.
Okay.
There was only one problem with Andrea's story. She had called and told her best friend that Rusty had been shot before she arrived at the hospital.
There's no way for her to know that unless Hemy told her, when there's no other source but Hemy. Boom.
Up next, one of Andrea's best friends takes the stand. And that's more bad news for Andrea.
Are you sure she said she was still on her way to the hospital?
Yes.
And she told you Rusty had been shot at that time?
Yes.
Oh, it's on.
While Andrea Sneiderman originally testified as a witness for the prosecution, after the hostility of the questioning, it appeared to many that she might be their next target.
Andrea's father approached me in the trial and said, "Can I ask you a question?" I said, "Yes, sir." And he said, "Are you going to charge Andrea with murder?" And I said, "Well, you've seen the same evidence I have. We'll just go from there."
And with prosecutors calling one of her best friends, Shauna Citron, to the stand, Andrea's situation was about to become even more precarious.
We had to figure out what the marriage was between Rusty and Andrea. We talked to her friends and found out in the friends that it wasn't the the Camelot that she was trying to present.
Did she indicate there was a period they didn't talk?
Yes.
What was the period?
I believe she said it was 1 week.
There were other fights during that period?
Yes.
After Andrea told you about the fights or the disagreements, were you concerned for her marriage?
There was a time that I was concerned for her marriage, yes.
At some point in time after the murder, did you have an opportunity to discuss with Andrea whether she was having the affair before the murder?
Yes.
Okay. Did Andrea admit or deny an affair with her boss at that time after the murder?
Denied it.
Based on all the time you've known Andrea, based on your observations of her mannerisms, when she told you no, did you believe her?
No, but my heart really wanted to believe her.
But you didn't believe her.
But the prosecution saved their most damaging questions for last.
On November 18th, 2010, did you receive a phone call from Andrea Sneiderman?
Yes. She was screaming to me that Rusty had been shot and she didn't know if he was dead or alive, and she was on the way to the hospital.
Are you sure she said she was still on her way to the hospital?
Yes.
And she told you Rusty had been shot at that time?
Yes.
As she left the witness stand, cameras captured the most surreal moment of the trial. Andrea had gotten up and was waiting for Shauna.
She approached Miss Citron and gave her a hug, even kissed her on the cheek, and everybody was just almost not breathing at the time.
I was actually sitting right there and I was like, wow, this is not what you see in a typical murder trial.
This was like an et tu brute moment. What I did after that was had her banned from the courtroom so she couldn't tamper with witnesses or interfere with witnesses.
When we return, the jury determines if Hemy Neuman is actually insane.
A verdict of not guilty by reason of insanity is a verdict that says Hemy was used. Hemy was manipulated.
This is an innocent woman. She didn't do it. It's a controversial case that's divided a community.
Karen Reed is accused of murdering her police officer boyfriend.
Prosecutors say she ran him over on purpose and left him to die in the cold.
But Reed claims that she's being framed.
It smells suspicious.
After years of legal fireworks, will the truth finally be revealed?
The end game is to figure out who killed John O'Keefe and hold these people responsible.
The Killer or Cover-Up Murder Trial. Live coverage weekday mornings, only on Court TV.
Lost in the drama around Andrea Sneiderman was the man actually on trial, Hemy Neuman. And according to the defense, he was insane when he killed Rusty, under the influence of a delusion that Andrea's children were his and directed by an angel to kill Rusty in order to protect the children. Bob Rubin and Doug Peters were Hemy Neuman's defense lawyers.
The question really is, on November the 18th, 2010, at the time of the shooting, did he understand that what he was doing was right or wrong? And that's really the only question in this case.
To answer that question, the defense called forensic psychologist Dr. Tracy Marks to the stand.
What was your opinion with regard to Hemy Neuman's legal insanity on November 18th, 2010, at the time Rusty Sneiderman was shot and killed?
It's my opinion that he was not able to distinguish right from wrong in the context of the shooting because of his bipolar disorder and being delusional at the time.
Hemy told Dr. Marks that the delusions began as a child when he was sent away to attend a boarding school in Israel. With no family to visit, he stayed on the empty campus during the winter holidays.
It was some kind of animal area, and that's where he stayed during these holidays, alone in this one room. He felt very worthless, felt like life wasn't worth living, and he described an experience of seeing a demon, that's what he called it, a demon that would say things like, "You're worthless," and would suggest to him that he shouldn't live.
The demon appeared during dark periods in Hemy's life until he met Andrea. The two soon began taking business trips together, including one to Norfolk, Virginia.
And the biggest thing that happened during this trip is that he told Ms. Sneiderman about his experience in Israel. And he'd never told anyone about it before, at least in terms of connecting how fearful, how afraid he was, and how painful the experience was for him.
And why is that significant?
He said that she listened and seemed to be very receptive. So he felt like they had a special connection.
Hemy told Dr. Marks their business trips soon became more romantic in nature. But as their relationship intensified, Hemy said Andrea began sending him mixed signals.
He hears, I want you, I must stay with my husband, and my husband is doing the same thing to the kids that your parents did to you.
The narrative at the time from the defense was that Andrea recognized some degree of vulnerability in him and fed him information that he needed to do something to get rid of her husband.
Letting him help with suggestions about how to take care of the children, buying gifts together, all of that, I think just stokes the fire of his delusions.
And that fire spread after Andrea invited Hemy to meet Rusty for a potential business partnership.
After he met with Rusty the second time on his way home, he got another visit from the angel where he felt he was told by the angel that Rusty was harming the kids and that Hemy had to protect the children.
Just a few days later, Rusty Sneiderman was dead. But according to the defense, while Hemy Neuman had pulled the trigger, he should be found not guilty because he was in the grip of a delusion at the time. A delusion they argued was brought on in part by the actions of Andrea Sneiderman.
This case is about one really bad woman, Andrea Sneiderman. Adulterer, tease, calculator, liar, and master manipulator.
The prosecution, too, targeted Andrea in their closing arguments.
Andrea knew Rusty was shot before anybody told her. Why would Andrea know Hemy shot Rusty and not tell the police? Because she wants to protect him and she wants to protect herself.
After hearing 14 days of testimony, the jury retired to determine Hemy Neuman's fate. After deliberating for 2 days, they returned with a verdict.
You may proceed.
State of Georgia versus Hemy Neuman. We, the jury, find the defendant as to count 1, guilty beyond a reasonable doubt, but mentally ill.
Just straight up guilty was what we wanted. Guilty but mentally ill is, in fact, a guilty verdict. It just means when he gets into the prison system, he's going to get psychological help.
It was disappointing that they didn't find him insane. Still, it confirmed that at least they did believe that there was something wrong with him.
Based upon all the facts and circumstances I've heard today, I'm going to sentence you to prison to life without parole.
After the trial, prosecutors met with members of the jury who had one major question on their minds, and it had nothing to do with Hemy Neuman.
The first thing out of the jury's mouth, almost collectively to me, was why was she not indicted with him?
When we return, the prosecutors decide whether or not to charge Andrea Sneiderman for the murder of her husband.
TV.
After a 14-day trial, Hemy Neuman had been found guilty of killing Rusty Sneiderman. The question remained, would Andrea Sneiderman be next?
This is crystal clear to me. She's a co-conspirator. You know, she's searching life insurance and death benefits on a computer. Let's take our time, but we're going to indict her for murder.
The prosecution put together a list of all the good facts that pointed towards Andrea's complicity in the crime. But they also took a hard look at the facts that pointed to her innocence. Meanwhile, Andrea's defense team was doing the same thing.
There was no evidence to support that Ms. Sneiderman at all was involved in any conspiracy. We scratched our heads every day as to what evidence can they put on us that we are unaware of.
For starters, there was no evidence Andrea and Hemy communicated about the murder, nor did Hemy ever point the finger at Andrea.
And Mr. Neuman has never said to anyone at any time that Andrea Sneiderman assisted him in the homicide of her husband.
Nor did either of them admit to having a sexual affair.
He never admitted to having an actual affair, but he was very connected to her, or felt very connected.
But what about those emails the two exchanged, expressing regret for something that had happened during a business trip to Greenville, South Carolina?
In my experience, where there's two interpretations to an act, one salacious, one innocent, the public likes to go with the salacious interpretation, and typically it works against the female.
And even if Hemy and Andrea had acted inappropriately, it was a far cry from murder. Further investigation by the district attorney's office also raised doubts about a key piece of evidence: internet searches on Rusty and Andrea's home computer about their life insurance benefits.
My certainty eroded. I was having problems sleeping at night because what I did not want to do was be a part of trying and convicting someone for murder that in fact did not commit murder.
Then, right before Andrea's murder trial was to begin, James had a visitor.
I went to see Mr. James and said, look, I've gone through this evidence, and if we go forward with this, I can assure you that a real jury of 12 people will acquit her of the homicide. And as a prosecutor, we are under an ethical obligation to not go forward with a criminal case unless we believe there's sufficient evidence to convict.
On the eve of Andrea Sneiderman's trial for killing her husband, the prosecutor stunned everyone by dropping the murder charges.
Happy is not the correct term. Andrea was very relieved. When it was finally dismissed, it was just a sigh of relief that maybe justice can happen.
But while the prosecution decided against trying her for murder, Andrea wasn't out of the woods yet.
We had indicted her for lying about the affair, for lying to police, and it was crystal clear that she had done that. And so we went forward on perjury charges and obstruction charges.
Andrea's lawyer argued that even if she did lie about an affair, such an offense didn't warrant jail time.
My argument to the court was that if she lied about having sex. And there are a lot of people in this country, including a former president, who could be in jail for the same thing.
The jury disagreed, and Andrea Sneiderman was convicted on 9 of the 13 charges against her.
I believe she got a 5-year sentence, of which she did probably about 9 months before she was paroled.
Andrea Sneiderman changed her name and moved to another state.
Don Geary, who still works as an assistant DA in Georgia, doesn't believe justice was done.
I was disappointed. The bottom line is this lady committed a murder. She didn't pull the trigger, but she committed a murder. And to walk away from that, I'll just leave it at disappointing.
But regardless of Geary's opinion, an experienced district attorney exhaustively reviewed the indictment against Andrea Sneiderman, found it lacking, and made the politically tough call to drop the most serious murder charges.
I'm not here to absolve Andrea Sneiderman and say she didn't commit murder. I'm here to say that I can't be sure. And if I can't be sure, I can't tell a jury to be sure.